we've certainly heard similar stories with regards to the perpetrators. This allegation that Eritrean soldiers, Amhara militia, the Fanu, also another Amhara militia have been involved with this. And also the sense that the women have that this is very, very intentional.
For thousands of years, women and young girls in Tigray have celebrated Ashenda, a festival specifically dedicated for them, where they would gather and celebrate their freedom and express themselves through dancing and singing. The girls are popularly known as daughters of Ashenda, and according to tradition, they would express their freedom and are protected from harassment and violence. However, the war on Tigray that started on November 4 of 2020 would hold the opposite for these daughters of Ashenda and all the women in Tigray.
What happened in Tigray, it was abnormal.
Rape, gang rape, sexual slavery, genital mutilation, all conducted with utmost brutality and at an industrial scale on women and girls in Tigray to ensure a lasting physical and psychological scar on the survivors, their family members, and the community.
Ethiopian women writ large were affected in a way that is unimaginable. In your worst nightmares, you cannot imagine what has happened to the women in Ethiopia. I listened to women who had, I don't know how they managed to tell us again the stories of the atrocities that were committed against them, whether were gang rapes or rapes of women that had just come out of a cesarean section or had these rapes in front of their children. I don't know how they managed to tell us that. In some cases, we found not just us in a really bad place, swallowing hard and holding back the tears, but even the translators could not do it. So it is a tragedy. It is going to be a lifelong healing process for many, many women and children.
Most of the women have been raped publicly in front of the community member,
or at least out in the open.
Exactly. Out in the open, purposely and deliberately. They took them outside of their house. While they can't rape them in their house, they took them deliberately and they raped them in front of other people.
Her 2 children were waiting for her to come home with food when she was pulled off a bus in Ethiopia's Tigray region to be gang raped and beaten by 23 soldiers over the course of 11 days. The incident happened in February in the city of Adigrat. She recalls what one of the men first said.
He said to me, "Listen to me, you go where we tell you to go. Otherwise, we will blast your belly out with this knife. We don't want to waste any of the bullets. We will cut your throat with this knife." Then I screamed out.
Villagers found her unconscious and bleeding. At the hospital, doctors removed blood-soaked items, including nails, that soldiers forced into her body after she was raped.
For centuries, sexual violence in its multiple form was considered an unavoidable consequence of war. In the past few decades, however, researchers and lawyers started to recognize a pattern of sexual violence that suggested that it was being done deliberately and systematically with the intent of achieving a military or political objective. In some cases, sexual violence was deployed as an indispensable tool of ethnic cleansing and genocide. Rape was first recognized as a weapon of genocide during the Balkan Wars, where Serb armed groups established rape camps. Serbian armed groups would enslave Bosnian women in these camps and rape them for weeks or even months.
The Balkan conflicts changed the perception of what it means to be a woman in war forever. This war was not just about ethnic divisions, historical grudges, and men killing men, but a violent, systemic attack on women, where rape was used to dehumanize and terrorize.
In Rwanda, the Hutu would systematically rape Tutsi women and use them as sex slaves as a means of terrorizing and exterminating the Tutsi community. Nearly 500,000 women were raped and only a few were able to survive. A more recent example is seen in Darfur, Sudan, where rape was used as a method of routing Black Africans.
This young woman may not have physical injuries from the genocide of Rwanda, but since birth her life has been blighted. Diani Mumararungu is a child of the genocide. She was born of rape, and she's grown up unable to understand why her mother couldn't give her the love most children receive.
She used to look at me, and I'm sure she saw a flashback of what happened to her. And then she'll be traumatized and would shout and chase me away. Many times, I would stay in other people's houses. I used to live in total despair, to the point where I would think it's better if I wasn't alive.
Or the 1990s, terrible years in which mass rape became a weapon of ethnic cleansing and extermination.
Women's bodies have become a veritable battlefield. Rape has become a weapon of war.
Sexual mutilation in the Democratic Republic of Congo, rape camps in Bosnia, deliberate transmissions of HIV/AIDS in Rwanda, sexual torture treated for the first time in history by the International Criminal Court as a constituent element in genocide.
If the rape is committed, for example, publicly, then it can be said that the one who is committing that rape has a confidence on certain system, on certain organization. So if it is public, for example, we can say that it is systematic. If it has similar pattern, then it might indicate that there is certain systemic way of doing it for certain purpose. If it is also, if you take for example gang rape, usually when a rape is made by more than one, there is high probability of it is possible that it can be established in the court of law or in anyone. So unless they have a confidence on a certain system, on a certain organization, it's less probable that gang rape will not be committed.
Tigrayan women and girls were not only raped by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces, but foreign objects were also put inside their bodies with the intention of ensuring that these women would not be able to give birth to a Tigrayan. As they raped them, these soldiers would tell them they were cleansing their blood and their bloodline. The goal is ethnic cleansing, a vicious crime under international law.
One of the women whose stories was relayed to us, because even here in Sudan, Matt, women are very, very afraid. This was relayed to us through a doctor, said that when she was raped repeatedly by Ethiopian soldiers, she says she was told that her blood was being purified, that she was being Amharized. The Amhara, of course, another ethnic group involved in that conflict in Ethiopia. And for those who are familiar with what happened in the former Yugoslavia, with what happened in Darfur, which I covered, that has chilling overtones. That just a very similar feeling that these women aren't just part of a conflict to push the Tigrayans off the land. This is about erasing Tigray and the Tigrayan identity and the Tigrayan bloodline, which is one of the hallmarks of genocide.
It seems that rape has been used as, well, I can say, weapon of genocide. Not weapon of war, but weapon of genocide. If we consider certain indicators, like for example in certain instances when they rape, they have said that they are raping to purify their blood. If they are raping to purify their blood, this cannot be a weapon of war. It's not to win the war, it is to purify their blood, and that's genocide. You can, for example, see from certain sources that after raping certain women, if they insert, for example, foreign things into their vagina, that also indicates that they are trying to prevent birth. At least they are incapacitating her. So in such circumstance also it can indicate genocide, because in the genocide definition, preventing birth among the group is considered as an act of genocide.
And the woman that I told you who survived a gang rape by 16 soldiers, all of them were Eritrean soldiers. And what they did were, this is really hard even to share, what they really did were there was a rope and there were 2 trees. So they, I don't know how to describe that in English. They let her stand there in the trees with her hands tied to
against
2 trees.
the trees.
Yes, to two trees. They tied her hands, two hands, her legs also, and then they let her stay the whole day in that tree, tying her hands in her also foots. And then after that, they went to most of the day they spent it by robbing, looting, distracting the Tigray's property in general. It could be individuals, could be the government also. So they tied her hand and her legs and they left. They were looting, distracting and everything, and they come back at night. And after they come, they were eating their dinner and everything. And after they finish, they untie her, all her hands and also her foots. And after they untie her, they raped her for 16 soldiers. And when she shared the story, she said that in the next morning, that means when they wake, the leader of the 16 soldiers, they told the rest, that means the other 15 soldiers, to keep going with the property and everything they hold. And after they leave, he raped her again. She was begging him. I mean, when she shares the story, it was even hard for me to listen, to be there and to share her pain. And she said he raped her again, alone. And after he did that, she said the moment he unties her hands and her legs, she describes it in a way that describes her physical pain at the moment in her womb, that occurred in her womb. And she said that when he untied her after the whole night, after she experienced a rape by 16 soldiers, and when he untied her in the morning to rape her again, she said her womb got out. So it only can be described as genocide or rape.
Does a number matters to call it a genocide or not?
No.
I have flashbacks of what happened. I remember my friends that were with me, my brother that died, and my parents still don't know what happened to us. It was on the 25th of November. It's been almost 2 years. They came to our area from two sides. Abi's soldiers on one side and Isaias's on the other. When they came, we fled to the wilderness. I got there on the 25th and left on the 28th. For 3 days, we didn't leave the house. I sneaked out of the house, but outside, it was deserted. My son was nowhere to be seen. I went back into the house and a gun was fired at me and I fell on the floor. The man who fired at me asked what was wrong with me. I told him I had lost my son and that I was looking for him. He asked me whether I was a spy. I told him I was not, and that I was simply looking for my son. He said he was suspicious of me and took me with him.
I was at church. I was walking back home. It was around 7 p.m. It wasn't dark yet. There were still people out. I was just 10 minutes away from home when 5 Eritrean soldiers caught up with me. One of them told me to stop and asked where I was coming from. He told me I wasn't allowed to move at that hour due to the curfew. I told him he was right, but that I was at a prayer ceremony that took longer than expected. I had nothing on me except my nazala and cell phone. He told me to wait and called the others.
They came and asked if there were any men in the house. My mother said there were none. She was so scared for me. They told me to go inside and pushed me. Then one told me to sit down. My mom called out for me. A soldier then hit her with the bottom of his rifle and she fell down. I don't know where and how they took my daughter, whom I was holding then. That is when they raped me. 3 Ethiopian soldiers raped me turn by turn. They left as if nothing happened and continued killing people in our neighborhood.
On our way to the central zone, my older brother, my brother-in-law, and my husband's grandfather got killed, and I got separated from others. The ones who raped me were Eritrean troops. Half of them held my child, while the others raped me until they thought I was dead. There were 6 of them. It was in a small village at the outskirts of Aksum. I don't know the name of the village, but it was in the wilderness. That's where they took us. They tied us up and kept us there with them.
ድሕሪ 5 ደቂቃ ፓትሮል ናይ ወታደራዊ መኪና እያ ናብ ቅድመ መጽያ ጠጠው ኢላ
5 minutes later, a military vehicle came to take me to a military camp where many soldiers were stationed. I was so afraid. I thought they were going to kill me. They had done that to many others like me. They didn't give me any food or water in the 3 days they kept me there. I thought to myself why they were so stingy that they couldn't spare one bullet to kill me. It's difficult to describe really. They wouldn't even let me out to use the bathroom, so I had to use the small room to urinate, so it smelled terrible. And sometimes I would become hungry to a point that I would lose consciousness.
ሓንቲ ጥይት ደምሲኢኖ ምለይ ክሳዕ ዝብል ኮይነና ከቢድ ነይሩ ናወት ዛረው ብጣዕሚ ይከቢድ ዘግናኒ
በልንዒ ኢሉ ብኢደ ሒዝኒ ንዕረአይ ውላድኪ አንተ ሞይ ትኩስ ንዕረአይ ኢልኒ
He said, if you say your son has died, come take a look. He was an Eritrean soldier. When I got there, I saw so many dead bodies lying on the ground, all of them residents of my town.
ናወዮ ካምቢ እንተኸድኩ ኣብዛ ካምቢ ንኽንይኹ ዝወዲ
Then I saw my son's body. I screamed, and he hit me on the back of my head with his rifle. I fell on top of my son's body, and 2 of my front teeth fell out. I asked the soldier to kill me. I told him I didn't have a reason to live anymore. He wouldn't spare me a bullet. I saw even more bodies lying on the ground. All were from my town. I screamed even more. I saw my neighbor with 2 of her children lying there.
3 days later, my stomach was swollen. My mother was so worried and she tried to take me to a health facility. Soldiers were everywhere, but my mother took me anyway, saying that she doesn't care even if they killed us. There was nowhere she could have taken me, but there were some volunteers who were there to treat children. They were supposed to treat children only, but my mother helped them understand my situation and they were able to give me some medication.
There were a lot of girls there, but not all of them made it to the camp. Some of them were from Rama. While they were traveling with us, the soldiers tried to rape them, but they fought back and were killed immediately. There were a lot of us at first, but not all of us made it out alive. When we got to the camp, there weren't that many of us. They took some of them to other places. I don't know where.
On the 3rd day, at around 8 p.m., I heard one of the soldiers say, "Call that woman." I could see them only because they had brought torches with them. They took me to the wilderness and accused me of being a supporter of the TPLF and said that was why I was walking on the streets past the curfew. They took me to the wilderness in the dark and told me to lie down. At first, I didn't understand what he meant. Then he said it again and then just kicked me to the ground and I fell on my right side of my face. Each of them took turns raping me. There was 5 of them. I lost consciousness because I was so hungry. Everything was beyond what I could bear. I was thirsty. I simply didn't have the energy to scream.
Then Amharic-speaking soldiers came. 7 of them dragged me away and raped me multiple times. I was not aware of what was happening to me. I was crying after seeing my son's body. I don't remember well, but after some days, they dragged me away and left me at my house. We are doing this to you because you are born from a junta, they would say. When I asked them why they wouldn't spare a bullet for me, they said it was all because I was a junta.
At first, I tried to fight back. When they started hitting me, I fell down, and they didn't stop until they thought I was dead. The soldiers were ordered to move from the area, and that's when they left. They just left us there tied up along with the dead bodies. They continued on for 4 or 5 days. Some residents of Aksum came and got us out of there. They themselves had fled their homes. They took us with them on their way back home.
I came to Maqala, but I wasn't able to escape from what I was trying to escape. One Ethiopian soldier dragged me into some place. I resisted, but he dragged me and put me inside a bathroom. I chose Des over him raping me, so I resisted him very hard. I struggled a lot, but at the end, he pushed me and I fell so hard into what I believe was a stone. A nail on the ground injured me as well. I lost consciousness and then he raped me. I knew so because I found my underwear elsewhere.
Amnesty International issued a report regarding sexual violence committed by Ethiopian forces and their Eritrean and Amhara allies since the start of the conflict in November of 2020, noting that hundreds had been subjected to brutal treatment aimed at degrading and dehumanizing them, indicating that widespread sexual violence was used as a means of terrorizing and humiliating survivors, an act that, according to Amnesty International, amounted to war crimes and crimes against humanity.
We come to the wartime rape and genocidal rape, it's the same. The root is the same. There's a power imbalancement that led the man to be entitled to perform such a horrific rape. It could be other sorts of other forms of that I'm going to share with you.
Right.
So when it's wartime rape, it has the root is the same, but the intention is different. So for example, in wartime rape, we have the United Nations definition. It says that a wartime rape is committed often intended to terrorize the population, break up families, and to destroy community, and in some instances, change the ethnic makeup of the next generation. It's deliberate, it's strategic. In wartime rape is a tool, a weapon, like there are other military weapons, right? So rape, when it's wartime rape, it's a weapon, it's a tool that combatants use to terrorize the population, to break up the family and destroy the community if it's possible. So when the perpetrators commit the genocidal rape, they are not only solely raping the woman based on their gender, they're not raping the woman, the girl or the child, but they are raping the ethnic, the group in general. And I think the age range, from my experience, it's from 8 years old up to 75 years old grandmother. And the 8 years old that I saw, she didn't even survive. She was raped on 2 days. So the age range was from 8 up to 75.
Despite the presence of a large body of evidence establishing the invading forces' guilt in flagrantly violating international law by weaponizing sexual violence, the perpetrators of these vicious atrocities and those who gave orders have not been brought to justice. In large part, this impunity is rooted in the fact that the state on behalf of which the soldiers waged war on Tigray is systematically implicated in sanctioning these crimes. In an appearance in Parliament in March of 2021, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed belittled the horrors to which women and girls in Tigray were subjected by saying that the rape of women by men did not bear comparison with what happened to his soldiers on the battlefield. This disregard for the traumatic pain and suffering that the women and girls in Tigray experienced is a constant theme in Abiy regime officials' public discourse, clearly showing the regime's brazen contempt for fundamental human rights. Unfortunately, impunity begets further impunity. Consequently, Tigrayan women and girls in Western Tigray and in other areas under Eritrean occupation continue to be subjected to these morally repugnant atrocity.
ትግራይ ስላለው ችግር የሚሰቃዩ ሰዎች የሰሜን ዕዝ ጥቃት በሚመለከት ምንም አያነሱ። ሰሜን ዕዝ እኮ አልተጠቃም፣ ተዋረደ። ሴቶች እኮ አሁን በወንድ የተደፈሩት የኛ ወታደሮች ግን በሳንጃ ተደፍረዋል።
In November of 2021, Ethiopia's former Ministry for Women and Children's Affairs announced publicly that she had resigned from her position following multiple attempts by Ethiopian officials to suppress the findings of an investigation by the ministry that revealed the gruesome nature of the violence perpetrated on women and girls in Tigray by Ethiopian forces and their allies from Eritrea and Amhara region.
Well, I saw Ethiopian system of governance is not reformable within. So I had to step out and I had to speak out, even though I was speaking. And I've been very vocal from the beginning, but I had to do it from outside the government.
You were the first federal official, a senior government official, to say conclusively that rape was used as a weapon of war in the Tigray conflict. But that was in a tweet. It didn't come in an official government report. There was no press release. Why did you do this in almost like in a personal capacity?
I think I've explained a little bit on my Washington interview, the reasons behind why I had to do it on my personal Twitter, which was all the pressures coming from the government and the PP or the Prosperity Party to put the lead on or to cover up. So I had to use any means that I can come out and speak to the Ethiopian people as well as other stakeholders.
Beyond the horrific and brutal acts of sexual violence, the women and girls of Tigray suffered. There was something systematic about the rapes. It felt premeditated. And the complicit silence that followed and the attempts to thwart investigations and block the resulting report was damning. I quickly became at odds with the Prime Minister's office and the Prosperity Party leadership after the reports. Of course, I tried to work with the system to help Tigray women and girls. But any request for assistance and funds on our emergency action plan to gender-based violence and child protection for Tigray was ignored by the Ministry of Finance and all other relevant stakeholders, agencies.
The deliberate destruction of health facilities and the communications blackout across Tigray have also meant that these victims would not be able to access medical treatment, thereby exposing them to a host of diseases and complications such as fistula, HIV, and other sexually transmitted diseases.
So I've been providing a short-term, immediate mental health and psychosocial support. I've been providing a long-term for about 6 months. We've been trying to continue that in the past 1 year, but it was very difficult to reach to the survivors since we have a problem with transportation or we have a problem with fuel and everything.
They are suffering from foul smelling, discharges from infection, bleeding, pregnancy and its complications, STI and its complications, STIs due to pregnancy. Most of our clients, about 800 clients, are done still now from the war till now. 300 of them are get pregnancy, are coming for termination or abortion. There is no any medication. There are different types of diseases are acquired. Chronic disease like HIV. There is no any medication. In the medical supplies, there is no any nutritious. Like plumpness, they are very in starvation. Starve, the clients are in starve. Their kids also in malnutrition. They are pregnant by now, coming cold cases. They are raped before 1 year, before 8 months, 9 months. They are coming by now. That is an assessment every village.
At first, my uterus had come out and my back had been dislocated. It used to burn when I urinate and I was not mentally stable, almost crazy you could say. All the things that happened to me, the fact that I left my home and the hunger makes me so depressed. And even now, I can't carry heavy things due to my back. I can't even carry my child. It hurts so much.
There was an odorous fluid coming out of my uterus. I had hypotension and I was constantly falling. I bled heavily for 9 months, non-stop. I didn't go to a health facility because they had all been looted. They had nothing left. Why would I go there? There was no healthcare service. If I had went, they would have asked me why I came and killed me if I had dared to tell the truth. I came here to Maqala after a year, hoping to get treatment.
According to Medicine Sans Frontiers, the violence in Tigray engulfed health facilities, leaving barely 1 out of 10 functional. Of 63 of 106 health facilities visited by MSF in Tigray in March of 2021, 30% had been damaged, 73% had been looted, and 87% were not functioning or only partially functioning. Similarly, 1 in every 5 health facilities had been occupied by troops. On November 9 of 2021, Human Rights Watch had issued a statement saying that the agony of the survivors was further exacerbated by lack of medical assistance caused by the destruction of health facilities and presence of soldiers at checkpoints during their occupation of Tigray. The report added that victims did not have access to essential healthcare services such as termination of pregnancy, treatment for HIV and hepatitis B, and care for broken bones, stab wounds, and traumatic fistula and support for depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress. The horrific acts of sexual violence that Tigrayan girls and women have experienced have left many of these women and girls with enduring traumatic physical and psychological scars that Tigray's health system, due to the ongoing siege, is in no way equipped to treat.
They come to this with different complications: physical assault, psychological assault, with bleeding, with sustained bone fracture, different types. But now we haven't had any medication. The only available thing in the hospital is the health worker only, without any medication and any material. Sometimes we are crying with them.
I felt so depressed. I didn't know what to tell my daughters about where I was going, so I didn't say anything. They don't know where I am. I haven't seen them for a year. What can I take with me? I'm so afraid of going back. I have no means of sustaining myself. There are no salaries anymore. I don't know what I'm going to do.
I became sick and overly stressed. I locked myself inside the house for fear of people seeing my condition. On top of that, the soldiers would come to my house and slaughter my sheep, steal my grains and my gold, and continued to assault me. I can't stand or sit for long. I have to lay down. I have tried to get treatment, but how can I? I have no money. I have no one to ask as well, since I fear that they might hate me if I told them what happened to me.
We are hungry, thirsty, and sick. Someone needs to intervene to save our lives. Help us. We are separated from our families. I can't see my children. They are all I have. I have been separated from my children. I'm alive and want to see them, but can't.
To provide her mental health and psychosocial support. For days, for weeks, for months, it wasn't quite enough. Of course, I will not give her life back. Nothing will be the same. But we should be there to provide the mental health and at least psychosocial support to help her cope with it for years. It takes years to
heal.
To help her, yes, to recover, to rehabilitate from what happened. Some they not only survive sexual violence, they lost their womb. They cannot they lose the chance of having a child again. That's not easy. Being raped by many soldiers, that's one thing, but also to suffer from the physical violence that have been perpetrated on you to damage your womb. And because of that, then you lose the chance of giving a birth again in your entire life.
The inability to give birth.
Yes. What happened in Tigray, it was abnormal. It was abnormal. So they're going to need an economical support. We're going to have to work on a livelihood support, and also they're going to need spiritual support.
A report by the Bureau of Health and Malala University indicates that over 127,000 women were raped, gang raped, and held in sexual slavery by Ethiopian, Eritrean, and Amhara forces. However, even this figure most likely underestimates the true scale and scope of sexual violence to which Tigrayan women and girls have been subjected, as many more women are too ashamed to admit to being raped due to cultural stigma associated with this horrific crime. The question now is if these women will ever be served justice.
So there is always something to do. The question is, how much are you trying?
I think without a shadow of a doubt, justice and accountability has to be had.